I'm done. I'm done being the person that I think certain people want me to be, or that I think this academic system or that science thinks that I
Yes.
should be, and forget it, right? If
Yep.
even that's not good enough, then I'm just going to be the person that I want to be. I'm going to show up as the person that I want to show up as. Like, I want feedback, but I'm not going to let that control who I am.
This is the Your Next Success podcast, and I am your host, Dr. Carolyn Sengel. You will hear stories from people who have navigated big career transitions themselves, so you can create a life-first career and become your own version of authentic success, one that is aligned, meaningful, and truly yours. Have you ever achieved what you thought was success, but then been unfulfilled when you reached your destination? Maybe you reached a point where you start questioning what you're driving toward and why you should even keep going. Or you start questioning what even moves you forward. My guest today reached that point at what she thought was the height of her career. Dr. Jen Heemstra is the Charles Allen Thomas Professor and Chair in the Department of Chemistry at Washington University in St. Louis. She leads a lab that works with nucleic acids and proteins. You may remember from high school biology that nucleic acids are things like DNA and RNA. She's also the author of Lab Work to Leadership. When she started her academic research, she thought she had signed up for a science job. What she actually got was a leadership job that she hadn't been trained for yet. And for years, she built her career by fitting in, doing what the people around her did, until she saw how much of herself she had set aside to do it. Then a day she once recalled as the worst of her life is when she decided to stop being who everyone else expected and start showing up as herself. What she found on the other side reshaped how she leads and who she lets herself be, leading with kindness and empathy, and working toward a healthier culture for the people who come after her. This is part one of a two-part conversation with Dr. Jen Heemstra. Jen Heemstra, welcome to Your Next Success. I am so ecstatic to be talking with you today.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk with you.
Okay, so we're going to get to all of the amazing things that you do. You are a renowned professor who's been at multiple universities, and you've written this amazing book, which happened to be the thing that drew me to you. I had somebody in my universe read your book. She knew of me, she knew of my podcast, and she contacted me with do you take guest requests? Because I really think you need to have Jen Heemstra on your podcast. And I was like, awesome. It was actually kind of funny. She said, I have an idea for you for somebody to have as a guest. And so she mentioned you. And I said, awesome. And she's like, and I would like you to be a guest on someone's podcast as well. And I'm like, okay, who do you have in mind? And she said, Mel Robbins. Right? And so I'm like,
That's awesome.
I would love that in
love
time. I'm not sure that that's in the near future, but I definitely would love it as a target. But I love that she was just so, she was somebody who was finishing up her PhD, trying to get her first real job, found such value in her book, and just the beauty and the innocence of connecting these worlds and like, why isn't it possible? Of course. Yeah. So loved it.
And I think that that's so good because we all need reminders of that sometimes, right? You know, it's good to know what's practical and what's likely to be possible, but sometimes we talk ourselves out of things too easily because we just think, oh, well, you know, that could never happen. And
Right.
I know I need those people in my life who are like, yeah, but like, what if? Like, what
Yeah.
would it cost you to try that? And yeah, I always appreciate that, the people who kind of encourage you to dream a little bigger than
Yeah.
you know, or encourage me to dream a little bigger than I otherwise would have.
So let's start way back at the beginning. And we're talking like, where were you born? Like, what was life like for the very youngest little Jen?
Yeah, I'm in my life now reflecting a lot on how those years and largely the bad things that happened in my childhood shape who I am and actually really set me on a path to leadership in really unexpected sorts of ways. But yeah, I was born in Southern California and grew up there. and had a really interesting home life, I would say, is a good way to put it. There were some things that were incredibly, incredibly challenging. At the same time, so haven't actually talked about this very much while both of my parents were alive, but they're both now passed. But I grew up in a house with a parent who had some pretty major mental health issues, and that, let's just say, made it not a safe place to be often, and really taught me a lot about who I wanted to be and who I didn't want to be as a kid. And so it was a really difficult childhood in a lot of ways. But then in a lot of ways, too, my parents made a bunch of great sacrifices that really benefited me and my brother, like at times when, they didn't know if they could afford, food for dinner, they still went out of their way to rent a place that was in a really good school district, so that when I hit a point that it was like, okay, it's not necessarily safe for me to go home after school and I need somewhere else to go, the thing that I fell into was Science Olympiad. And so I look back and think about all of the things that could have happened to someone who is growing up in the same way that I was and with all of the same things around me. I was incredibly, incredibly fortunate for how it worked out. I also tell people now, I'm like, when people grow up in abusive situations, they often seek out something that they can control. People engage in self-harm, or they abuse alcohol or drugs or whatever. And I'm like, for whatever reason, the way I grew up, whether it was something my parents did or where we were or who my friends were, the thing that I reached to control was academic achievement. Yes. Academic achievement was my drug.
Yes.
And that's a really fortunate thing to have, right? That it wasn't necessarily always healthy, but of all the things that I could have gotten into, it kind of set me up well for my future.
I can resonate with that so much on several different levels. I think this is also part of, maybe from the I'm about to have a big milestone birthday. By the time this airs, that will have already happened. But I have so much more empathy for my own growing up situation now from this vantage point, and seeing my kids, they're about to be 17 and 20, and even reflecting back on their childhoods. And I didn't realize that I was having mental health struggles or challenges. And I didn't realize that I was in a household because it was never talked about, right? But the academic achievement, that was the safe thing, or being involved in lots of after school activities, that was just, it was an outlet. It was something to do. And then when you catch that recognition for, all A's or this or that, or this leadership position, I don't know, that did become my drug of choice as well, was just that constant thriving for what I thought was success at that moment, or external validation, because somehow I wasn't able to give that to myself.
But I'm going to guess that we're probably both coming near the same milestone birthday, and something I've been talking to my coach about, but then also sharing with friends about, is I'm in this moment of my life where for the first time really in almost 4 decades, I actually feel like I'm in a good, safe place where I can actually breathe for the first time. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, but what do you do when you wake up one day in your late 40s and realize that so much of your success has all just come out of a trauma response?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my goodness, how do I motivate myself now? How do I even think about what drives me when the answer isn't adrenaline anymore? And I don't, because I just grew up gamifying it. It was okay, it's a fun adventure race of where am I going to sleep tonight? But then that also at a very young age taught me skills that I look around and say, wow, that is really, really useful. I learned how to navigate complicated systems, like healthcare, social service, all these different things. And I learned how to advocate for myself. And I wouldn't wish my childhood on anyone, but I don't know that I would have gained those skills otherwise. Yeah. I navigate complicated systems, like how NIH funding works and how, tenure works and how the academy works. And you have to advocate for yourself a lot because you're like a small business owner. And I just look at that now and think, wow, that really, really impacted me a lot. But so much of it came out of really difficult circumstances.
It was 2020, pre-2020. So we're talking like early March, or maybe it was late February. I had been on this but wait, there's more than just straight science. And I never took like a psychology class in college or any of it because I was like I think I had a block. I was a head attached to a body with a lot of knowledge, but like when I would hear people like occasionally talk about like integration, I'm like, well, oh my gosh, it just made me want to
what
vomit.
What are you talking about? Yeah.
I didn't know the feelings. I thought that the pictures with all the different faces and the emotions, like, wow, that was interesting artwork on a couple people's cubicle walls, but it was also really foreign to me. And then I start entering into some of this discovering phase, and it was kind of freeing and terrifying in the same moment. Yeah. Right? And I had heard Oprah. I went to this conference on something about living your best life. And it's like, well, hell yes, I want this. And I had just come off of, I had ended up having some health challenges that I didn't realize were to my quest for success. So I had high blood pressure with 1, then 2, then 3 medicines. Next thing you know, I had an irregular heart rate where my heart would go to 210 and I'm just sitting on the couch.
Yeah, this is not good.
It's like, it sounded like Lamaze breathing. There was no baby. It was not good. Okay, so it's like, yes, of course I want to live my best life. And I heard Oprah talking about, and I don't know if you've ever heard her talking about her past story.
Yeah.
And then her mom was passing away. And some people were like, you really should go see her. And she had all this anger and resentment. She didn't want to go see her because of all the pain and all the things that she had caused. And then she got to a point where, yeah, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to tell her what's up. Right. And then as she goes through that and she gets to her deathbed, she had this whole change of demeanor and understanding in that moment where she realized she would never have become who she is had she not gone through all of those experiences. And even at my same time hearing all of this, I'm like, well, that's messed up, But also it took a while for that to kind of sink in and be like, you know what? Yeah, there were some days, and regardless whether it was childhood or people not believing in me or certain situations or work or just a variety of stuff. And now from this vantage point, I really can look back and be like, yeah, that really did happen for me. But I thought it was happening to me. And I'm like, really? I guess I need another challenge, another character building experience. Okay, let me get my character then.
But my gosh, I feel so much of that. I mean, just jumping to my mid-career and really the huge inflection point I had there was, and so if you've read the books, that it was getting this less than favorable tenure vote when I was coming up for tenure, which you always have to like stop and say, some of your audience might not know this, that it's not, getting a tenure vote, it's not like winning a national election where like 51% gets it done. Yeah. It's like taking a class where 50% is an F and you failed and you're out. You really need like 70 or 80% to succeed. And that vote was such a horrible day. I mean, I felt like I had let down all the people I care about the most in my life. And it was, arguably the worst day of my life. And I've had some really, really, really bad days. But the fact that it wasn't just things happening to me, it was like I felt like I had caused this bad situation, that I had somehow failed. And I later realized that that probably wasn't the case. But that was such a change for me because I had been trying to fit in, the way I had made it in my career up till then was to fit in and go along and do what the people around me were doing. And I felt like I had sacrificed. I realized it was this huge wake-up call of like, I have sacrificed so much of the person that I actually want to be, things like kindness and empathy. I had lost that trying so hard to fit in. And on that day, the dual kind of bifurcation of half of my colleagues saying, no, we think you don't deserve this job anymore. And then my research group showing up with such kindness and empathy and loyalty and like, all right, we're in it together. We're going to get through this together. It just was this amazing wake-up call of like, wow, I thought I had been playing by those people's rules. Yeah. And like a lot of good that did me. And so that's gone, right? Yeah. Like I'm done being the person that I think certain people want me to be, or that I think this academic system or that science thinks that I should be, and forget it, right? If even that's not good enough, then I'm just going to be the person that I want to be. I'm going to show up as the person that I want to show up as. And like, I want feedback, but I'm not going to let that control who I am.
Yes. Yeah, we resonate a lot on a lot of different things. So I didn't have a 10-year vote.
Yes.
But there were some separate things and times in my own life. And I do want to get back and catch everybody up on the story even before that 10-year vote. But I remember, so I had a fellowship that only one person in all of North America got. And then I got my job doing R&D, making structural adhesives for cars and doing fatigue and fracture mechanics. Like nobody would think that meeting me today. Alas, it was true. I had gotten laid off. That was a hit to the ego. I stayed home as a mom for a few years. I went back as an executive recruiter for the chemical industry. And I'm like, well, this is it. Like I can actually help people. And I kept seeing this pattern of people externally successful, internally not fulfilled. And then after my own health challenges and a real wake up sit down that my husband had with me around our 20th wedding anniversary, I chose myself, right? I had to leave that situation to become who I wanted to be and who I'd kind of dreamed of being. And then I had this moment where there was like a SciEx conference, okay? And one of my friends who had been someone who would review Army research grants, that was her job. She left her job around the same time that I left mine. She started a company called Wise Investigator. If there are any PIs out there who are newly to the thing and not sure how it works with the whole grant writing system, there is indeed a company and a really dedicated, amazing person, Dr. Julia Barzik, who owns Wise Investigator. She can absolutely help you. Well, Julia meets this person through networking who is coordinating the SciEx conference that was happening in Raleigh, just 20 minutes down the road. And she's like, well, I don't know if you know, but if you're wanting to have career-related talks, you know, Dr. Carolyn Sangel has her own company now. And again, this was somebody speaking my name in a room that I wasn't even in for opportunities I didn't even know existed. And they said yes. And I had, next thing you know, the opportunity to give 4 short career-related talks in the middle of their expo floor. And I did it. And I remember preparing for those talks. And of course, I'd prepared for scientific talks before. And I thought, you know what? What if? What if I don't show up as Dr. Carolyn Sangel, who's going to talk about this scientific thing about careers and just really boring, and believe me, because I'm telling you. I'm like,
what if I be the person I want to be?
What if I just show up like the lovable, energetic, hot mess that really means well, that wants to do good? What if I just show up as that person? And I got sparkly loafers because I was like, I got to have a little personality, but still, you know, it's kind of for me.
Yes.
And I showed up as myself, fully myself. And that led to more opportunities because of the people who were in the audience, and they saw me as me. They didn't know me as anything. But they said, yes, I want more. And I was like, well, why did I hide all those years? You know? So
yes, that's so good. And I think authenticity tends to resonate with people.
Yeah.
But then, of course, there's always going to be some people who don't like it. There's a particular conference in my field that I went to once. And then as I started doing well in my field, I kind of was like, it's really odd. They've never invited me to speak at this conference. It's like right in my field. And then one of my friends was on the organizing committee and said something like, oh yeah, I keep suggesting your name, but there's certain people who have a lot of control over that conference. And they're like, oh, I do not like how she gives a talk. And I was like, oh, what? Because I'm like not totally boring. Like I actually like, I might get excited about something, or I might even like jump up and down a little bit, or I might tell a joke, you know, because I actually try to engage an audience.
Yep.
But to some people, that's just, you know, what I see as engaging, they see as unprofessional. Yeah. And I'm just like, you know what? Y'all are totally entitled to your opinion. I'm going to change that in my domain of control wherever I can. But if it's not something I can do anything about, I'm like, that's fine. Have your conference. I'll never go. It's fine.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need that. It makes me frustrated. It makes me angry, especially for people who are, this happened to me. This was early in my career. And I was like, okay, well, whatever. But it's frustrating if early career folks continue to experience that, because it can have a real cost for their careers. But at the same time, it's just, I kind of made a decision of, well, if I can't be myself, then,
then I'm out.
What am I? And that was what my tenure vote really sealed the deal on, was like, well, look, if I can't show up as myself, then I don't want to be here. I will go find somewhere else to be and something else to do.
And for me, I kept that pretending, thinking I had to fit in and thinking I needed to do that. And I didn't realize, but all of those health-related challenges were directly because I was suppressing who I was to try to fit into a mold of what I thought I had to be. And it doesn't have to be that way, everyone. So if you're feeling some sort of internal tension or turmoil, it does not have to stay. This is data, it's information. So I also had to kind of take that into account of, what is this experience telling me? When I am exhausted at the end of the day, what is that telling me? When I'm not able to show up fully, joyfully for the beautiful lives in my own household, is that what I want to carry forward? Is it? And if not, then how can I strategically start to plan that out, do that out? And now, of course, I have the whole next success method with very scientifically validated, data-driven assessments to help somebody understand, okay, who am I? What is it like to be me? What is it like to not be me? What is it like to communicate with me? What is the mental fitness and resilience in my mind? And most importantly, what's the life I'd love to live? And how can my career fuel that life instead of detract from it? So
I love that. And I actually have a question for you. It's something I think I'm going to jump to, like, a little bit somewhere between where we started with my story and how I ended up as this, tenure track faculty member, facing down this negative tenure vote. And I'm really curious. It's a topic I often talk to students about, or early career researchers. I'm curious what you think about it as a coach. It's that, the easy choices to be yourself is when the people expecting you to be different aren't people that you care about, right? Sometimes those can be easier ones. But what about when the expectation to be a certain way that's not authentically aligned with who you are coming from presumably the most important people in your life, especially family? And so a little bit of my stories, I've talked about how I grew up, and later in life, I always had a good relationship with my dad. He passed away when I was in grad school. Later in life, kind of made peace with my mom, and always was a detente where there were a lot of things we just didn't talk about, but we could at least kind of coexist. I could go visit her. I could be with her as she battled with cancer and near the end of her life. But I grew up in that way where I felt like my family was mostly chosen family. Like, I didn't feel like I had necessarily a family that I knew would have my back. I grew up in a way where I was like, I can't ever plan on having to come back home. Like, if I can't pay my rent, I might be sleeping in my car, sort of thing, or couch surfing with a friend or whatever. And so when I met my spouse, and he had this absolutely amazing family, it was like the family I always wanted. And they were so loving and wonderful. But both of our families, there was kind of this expectation, probably more so from my family than even his, but expectation that they viewed my role as, a very domestic one of, kind of the cooking and having babies and staying home and raising those kids. In our church that we went to is very much like, you will not get a job. Like, you cannot work outside the home. In our families, that wasn't necessarily said, but there was this expectation around a certain lifestyle that I would lead once we got married. And I always wanted kids. And I have so much respect for women who are wonderful chefs, or who decorate their home beautifully, or who decide to stay home and raise their kids. But those things were not at all genuine to me. Like I joke, but also seriously, like the most off-brand, like, do you even know me gift I ever got was like a subscription to Good Housekeeping magazine or something, right? And I tried so hard. I like read every page and I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the Home Goods and I'm going to get these decorations and I'm going to make the recipes and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And I went to grad school thinking, okay, well, now that I'm married, the only thing that comes after this is I will have babies and stay home and never have a job. And I was trying so hard. I was trying to be like an overachiever of this culture. And I was so freaking miserable. And in some ways, in a really weird way, it actually made my PhD maybe better because I could just go and have fun and there were no expectations. Like, it was like, well, it doesn't matter because there's no job at the end of this. I don't even have to worry about getting a job. But then it was also super depressing because I knew what I really, 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 really wanted. And I was like, yeah, but I shouldn't even think about it because it is so unattainable. Like being a faculty member, being in the job I'm in now was what I wanted. But I was like, it might as well be like, I might as well say I want to be an astronaut and fly to Mars, right? Like it was that impossible and that unattainable. And the only thing that broke me out of that was then when I tried to go about doing that, we realized that maybe I never could get pregnant and have kids. And then it finally, like this miracle happened. I got pregnant and then I had a pregnancy loss in this incredibly like gut-wrenching, like on vacation with my in-laws, literally within 12 hours of us telling them that they were about to have their first grandkid, I wake up like at 3 a.m. in some little cabin in, the rural Illinois, having a miscarriage. And like, it was just so heart-wrenching. And then like, we couldn't get pregnant again. Like and it broke me. It's like but it took that level of just gut-wrenching pain of, and just complete upending of what I thought my life was going to be in order to make me finally say, you know what, maybe I need to pursue what I want to do in my career and be authentic to myself rather than trying to fit into this mold of family expectations. And, and again, I think like our families are wonderful. But there was, and they've actually evolved a lot too. I think like my mom was very supportive of my career in the end. It took time, but she eventually was incredibly, incredibly supportive. I felt that pressure from places even beyond family, other communities we were part of. And I just was so desperate to fit in and so desperate to meet expectations because I finally had this family. And so, so what do you tell people when you coach, when they're like, this is the authentic path for me, but my family wants me to do this instead?
Firstly, thank you for sharing all of that, because I think this is also something that we don't talk enough about, regardless which gender, right? People join other people and you end up having families and you have new families that you didn't originally grow up with. And then there's all these other expectations. And then as you're building a life with somebody, how you want to be, and are you going to have children or able to have children and bringing them into the world? And how does that change things and all of those things? And it's absolutely 100% normal. And that's why a lot of times I try to help people understand now, because I didn't know this, right? I had to go through all the mess to help it be my message. I had to realize that a lot of these things that I had gone through were so that I could actually understand.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, Jen, like of course my husband has a few different siblings. I have a sibling, and I mean, there was a time, and this is absolutely horrible to say, and I'm going to just go ahead and say it because it's part of who I am, but there was a time when everybody's starting to have kids, and then it's like, well, do you want to hold your niece or nephew? And I literally said something like, and of course I wanted to have kids too, because that was going to be part of the, the white picket fence and and we're going to have a pet, and we're going to have 2 cars, and we're going to have a nice house. And like, that was just kind of like this childhood dream. I wanted my own children, but then holding my nieces or nephews prior to having them, I'd be like, well, I mean, I guess if everybody else has already had their turn and it's my turn, I'll give it a go, but like not in
wanting that.
And I'm like, and I also didn't know how to hold the baby. I didn't like, what do you do? Yeah. And like, it just was this whole thing. And
you're like, and that's a pretty big life decision to make.
And then when I had my own children though, there somehow was this emotional tether. But also I had this, like, if my baby was crying, therefore I'm a horrible mom because my baby's crying, and all of these, and now there's all these extra, and I never wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. I would look at them while I was going out on lunches with other people from work, and I'm like, oh, they have no idea what it's really like. Good for them with their matching outfits and this and that and the other, and yeah, they're really nice, clean car, and they have kids too. And like, you could just tell as they're getting out, you're like, wow, but they have no idea what it's really like. Well, then when I was a stay-at-home mom, I was like, wow, this is insanely hard and important and cool. And I didn't ask for it. Thank you for giving me the experience so that I can have a greater empathy of understanding. Okay, and there's different ages and stages that we naturally start to question our life and our careers. And I didn't know that. And so the first ones are like 15 to 18, and then 22 to 26, and then every 7 to 10 years after that. Imagine what your life would be like if your career aligned with who you are, what you do best, and actually fueled the life you want. At Next Success, we support all ages and stages through career transitions, from students exploring majors or careers to professionals committed to self-awareness and leadership growth. Stay connected and explore what's possible at nextsuccesscareers.com, and follow Next Success Method on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. By choice or by force, you add something new to your life, or somebody that you care about, or you had a close tie dies, right? Or is very sick. Like, there's all these times that we start to reevaluate our life. And it's so hard for anyone else, even if it's our spouse or our parent or our sibling or our child, to understand the vision that we have of what's possible or what could be, because it wasn't given to them. And so they have their own idea or their understanding, albeit well-intentioned from where they are in their standpoint of what they think is good for us or how they think it's supposed to go or this or that. But the family you come from and the family you have now is an essential part of deciding and discovering what you want for your vision of your life. Like, so many people, I'll say your career is like an iceberg. So many people are focused on the title, the salary, the location. As long as you have that, the title, the salary, the location, you are good.
No.
But the reality is, underneath the iceberg, that goes down 7, 8, or 9 layers. And that's where I developed, because that question of, why I'm successful. Why don't I feel fulfilled?
Why don't I feel like it? Yeah.
How many people, they would die to have this title, they'd die to have this salary, and I'm just like taking it all for granted, like it's not good enough for me? What is that? And that's where I realized, there is this model, this whole person model, which takes into account your career development stage, your abilities, your skills, your personal style, your interests, your family that you come from or you have now, your goals and your values. All of those things are so important for deciding what is the vision you want. Because living into the vision somebody else had, or even the vision that I had, younger me, I had this kind of conflict of thinking like, well, how is it? Grandfather passed away, and he had worked at like a steel mill kind of a company. He only had gone to school to the 3rd grade. He worked at a company for his whole entire career. That was part of that generation. And after decades of working for them, he passed away, but nobody from the company showed up for his funeral. But they sent a little flower arrangement, right? And I remember and I was in grad school, but I remember going to that and kind of having a little bit of a perspective. Like, he had gotten a watch from them, and he was so proud of that watch. And then he passes away, and there's just this flowers, but no one showed up.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like, oh, all that time you gave. All that time. Now, granted, it helped, his kids all ended up going to college, having degrees, wonderful lives for the sacrifices that he made. But something hit me a little bit different there of like, wait a minute, we're here. Where are they? All of those people that you worked with and through and helped, or the company. Thank you for the flowers, but something's missing. And what do I want? As I have a family, do I want to be with them or not with them? And even though I said I wanted to be with them, or I wanted to be integrally involved in their lives, I had been making choices that weren't aligned with my deeper knowing. And that caused the stress and the frustration. So What do I tell people when they're starting to realize that they're operating outside of their current vision or their revised vision? Number one, congratulations. Great job on noticing that. And now, how would you like that to fit in, right? How would you like that to fit into the life that you're building? It does not have to stay that way, but let's dream about what would it be like? How would you like to show up? How can we work towards that? And sometimes people are like, well, I do still need this salary and benefits. I'm like, okay, and how can we make it more aligned with what you want? How can you start exploring other possibilities while still keeping that? Versus, or is there a newfound thing of here's why you're doing it, or here's a timeline that makes it palatable?
Say, often it's not the what that needs to change. It's more the why, right? And that's one I will. What?
The same experience, and we see this in science. We see this in human relationships. We see this in families. The same experiment happens. Multiple people observe it, and they all have a different and unique perspective of what actually happened and how that then we could, and this is the beautiful thing about science. It's like, what is failure? Failure is the opportunity to try again, begin again more intelligently. Let's go. Hook me up to failure so I can get closer to like, let me fail forward. Let me fail often. I mean, rubber, that's what I studied in grad school. It was a mistake. It was an accident, like that just happened to happen, and somebody was observant about it. And how many things are that? Opportunities exist every single day. And we have the opportunity to make it into something greater if that's aligned or not, right? Like, I don't want to talk at your conference then anyway. You don't want me? You don't see how I'm awesome? Peace. Enjoy. Okay, let's take it back. 8th grade, something happened. This 8th grade to 9th grade, because I think this is important too, and speaks to your resilience, and it speaks to you're not going to tell me who I am or what I'm going to do, but what happened then?
Oh, yeah. So, it taught me a really valuable lesson, and that, yes, there was some resilience or kind of stubbornness, but I think there was even more to it than that. So as I was going from 8th grade to 9th grade, you had to show up to register for classes. And so you had to wait in line. I could actually take you to the place in the building at my high school where we were waiting in line to talk to the guidance counselor. And the guidance counselor sat there with a little box of 3x5 index cards, with one for each student. And when you got out there, they'd rifle through and pull out your index card and tell you what classes you had the option of taking during 9th grade, your first year of high school. And as I'm standing in line, a few of my friends made it to the front of the line, and they're circling back and they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to take a 9th grade biology class. And I was like, okay, cool. I guess I'll see you in that, right? Because I was really good at math. I really, really enjoyed math. Science was okay, but I thought I was like, okay, I'm an academic, I'm an achiever. I'm doing well in science. I'm sure, certainly, I'll be in this science class. But you had to have permission to take the science class. You had to be deemed good enough at science to take the science class. And it had really profound implications for the trajectory of your high school career. Because if you were allowed to take 9th grade biology, then you could go on and do chemistry, physics, and actually do some AP classes, AP science classes in your senior year. But if you weren't allowed to take 9th grade biology, then you were on this non-science intensive track where it's okay, well, in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, you'll kind of get the basics, but you're not going to go be a scientist or anything. So we'll just put you in these other classes. And it was actually a really, really important sort of decision, which the fact that they were making decisions like that based on what your 8th grade science teacher said about you is pretty abysmal. So I get to the front of the line, and the guidance counselor pulls out my little card, and she goes, well, you haven't been approved to take 9th grade biology, so what else do you want to take instead? And I was like, wait, what? I really want to take biology. And she said, well, no, your 8th grade science teacher, your 8th grade science teacher said that you are not skilled at science, and so you are not allowed to take 9th grade biology. Here's a list of other classes you can take instead. I ended up taking typing, which was not where I wanted to be, but was shockingly useful in my job now, where I stand at my computer and type emails and things all day. But I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm bad at science. But then the really fortuitous thing is that my friends, they were like, okay, but like we're doing Science Olympiad and you should do Science Olympiad. And I was like, no, I'm bad at science. And they were like, but the teacher is super nice and you can just come hang out. You don't even have to do it. And I was like, okay, well, I need somewhere to go after school. You kind of had to like, after school, stay out and do stuff. And then you could kind of cruise in right before dinner, grab some food, like assess the situation, figure out like, can I go to my room and do homework, or do I need to like, bail again and go find somewhere else to be? And so I needed to fill that like after school until dinner. And so they were like, oh, she's just super cool. You should just come on by. So I was like, okay, fine. Whatever. It sounds good. So I walked in and the teacher, Dr. Marcia Sprang, amazing person who actually ended up like literally saving my life later in high school. She's like, welcome to Science Olympiad. I'm like, oh, I'm bad at science. I'm not in 9th grade biology. I didn't get approved for it. I'm bad at science. I don't belong here. And she was like, look, it's fine. Anyone can do science. I was like, yeah, but I'm not in biology. I can't, my friends are doing these events like genetics and whatever, and I can't do that. And she was like, okay, look, there's a competition. I forget what it was called, but it was all about geology and rocks. And she was like, and nobody takes geology, so you're not behind at all, and you can just go do that. And I would sit there. There was a big box and it had all these egg cartons in it. And in each egg carton, you'd open it up and there were 12 different rocks. And each one had a little piece of paper under it where it said what it was. And so I would sit there and there were like 200 rocks. And I think by the end of the first week, I had memorized all of them. I could kind of like take them all out and quiz myself on them and put them all back and know what all of them were. And then at some point she was like, okay, wait, so tell me again why you're not in biology. And I was like, remember, I was told I was bad at science. And she was like, oh, rolled her eyes in the way that is so gratifying when people do that for you, and was like, we're going to fix this. And eventually came up with a plan for like, okay, here's the deal. You're going to take biology and chemistry both next year, and then you'll be back on track. And I was just so fortunate to have that person in my life who saw that potential. And then eventually I got into like academic decathlon that she also coached, and I had her as my AP Chem and AP Physics teacher.
Oh, wow.
And she's just an amazing human being who believed in me. And the other thing I learned from that too is that if I had been told, oh, you're really good at science, you should do Science Olympiad, I probably would have had all of this expectation weighing on me. And I probably either wouldn't have enjoyed it or would have had so much pressure, I would have not done my best at it. It would have been like, oh, I'm so stressed, I have to memorize all these rocks or whatever. But because I could just be there and do it purely out of that intrinsic motivation, it was like, it was the day I learned about intrinsic motivation, right?
Yeah.
Is the ability to just be like, nobody's expecting anything from me. I'm not even supposed to be good at this. I'm not even supposed to be here. But I'm just doing this because it seems fun. That probably played a major role in me becoming a scientist. And actually, I look back and I see all of these wild connections now. It's so funny because one of the moments, even once I decided I wanted to go into science, I was more thinking like astronomy or maybe physics. Chemistry wasn't on my radar at all until the middle of college. But there was one particular night when this coach has been kind of working with me and talking with me about my home situation, was like, okay, well, if you ever feel ready to like, kind of like stage the intervention and talk about what's been happening, she was like, look, I'm having a study session this evening. If you go home, if you feel like you can have the conversation, this is a night where you can then come back here and hang out in the classroom while I have the study session with this other class. And then she was like, and if you feel like you can't go home after that, we'll find something. And so I was like, okay. And then it worked out that I did have the conversation. I went to the study session and I spent, the class is having a study session. I'm just like hanging out. Yeah. And the thing that I did that is so wild, and I will never forget this, is she was just like, look, you need something to just like steady your mind and steady your emotions. So she gave me a molecular modeling kit and like a biochemistry textbook. And she was like, here, go make all the DNA nucleotides. And I sat there and I was like, I made adenine, right? And I will never, ever, ever forget that. But what's so wild is that my lab does nucleic acids now. And I don't know that those things are connected, But I just look back at that and think, wow, how interesting that the ties between what kind of saved me from a lot of things early in my life is now what I do for a living, and how fun that is.
See, that's the thing. It's like there's been literally elements, but there's been like things of who
well
we
played.
are
Well played.
that have been there all along, right? That have been there all
Yeah.
along. And like, so I thought I was too much, or I thought I was not enough. And the reality is I was just becoming. I was just becoming into this thing, right? And, you know, once you're trained as a scientist, you can't go back. You can do different careers, you can do different things, but your way at looking at the world, your way of iterating, the scientific method, the like, nice opinion, bring the data, you know, like, but it's all still foundational and helpful for like whatever direction somebody becomes, lab leader, industrial person, whatever.
Yeah.
Now,
and I'll say in my case, like, if you asked her this story, she might be like, I just handed her a biochemistry textbook and said, make things. And it was me who chose nucleobases. Like, that's entirely possible. But I just remember making adenine and being like, I made adenine.
Okay, now, is this, because you mentioned this, I've heard this on a couple different podcasts. Like, is this the time that literally saved your life in high school? Like, what do you mean by that? What was that? And I'm not trying to pry, but.
Yeah. So well, kind of trigger warning for anyone in the audience, but the situation hit a point where I actually went out one night with a plan to end my own life. And I didn't, but I also didn't really come back from that in any healthier of a state. And then I'm going to totally cry as I tell the story, but that's okay. Like I said, levels of vulnerability that make other people really nauseous are like, a Wednesday afternoon for me. But I came back, and sometime after that, soon after that, I told this teacher, shared with her that I had this experience. And I mean, she was amazing and incredibly supportive. And then the next day, when I was in her class at that point, I forget, AP Chem or AP Physics, I was in her class, and I got, you know, the little, you'll probably relate to this, when you get the little call slip in your class, someone comes and delivers it, and the teacher reads it, and is like, oh, you know, Jennifer, go to the principal's office. And it was the social worker, school psychologist, or, you know, I didn't have a frame of reference to understand exactly what people were, but some sort of social worker or psychologist who then started talking to me about what was going on in my life. And we talked about kind of what my options were. I was almost 18, and so it was the conversation of like, do I go emancipated? Do I go into foster care? I was just on the borderline where I didn't have to do those things. Like, I could stick it out in my home and just try to like make it to 18. And so I was like, okay, I think I'll do that. And actually, out of this kind of intervention conversation I had, things actually did get better, or at least got like, it was kind of like, okay, you just do your own thing, and like, you know, you can stay here and we'll just not worry about the rest. And again, all of this, there was a lot of rebuilding of the relationship in adulthood. The teacher really, you know, kind of saved my life by, well, I didn't know anything. All I knew was I got a call slip out of class, and like, I'm talking to the social worker who knows what happened. And then when I came back to class, or I was after school in Science Olympiad or whatever, the next time I saw this teacher, she kind of pulled me aside and said like, oh, how did that conversation go? And I was like, oh, it was really good and really helpful. And the part that's always going to make me cry is that she was like, I felt like, well, now I know she's a mandatory reporter. She was like, I literally had to say something, and I care about you, and so I really wanted to say something. She was like, but I was so afraid you were going to be really mad at me that I had to report this, and that then you had to talk to this person. And I was like, no, like, just knowing that an adult actually cares about me enough that like an adult who I care about in my life cares whether I live or not, like, that was such an incredible feeling. And so I now think about that often in my own role, actually, as an educator, that, you know, I try to, if someone's about to tell me something that I would have to report, you know, I'm pretty good about being like, okay, what you're about to tell me, I'm probably going to have to report. But I often get in situations where I'm like, oh, this person's going to really hate me that I have to report this. But then I think about how in my own life, it was just like, oh my goodness, like that means that like one person actually cares about me enough to have done that. Like, okay, that's like, I can be okay.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing all of that and for being vulnerable and for reminding everyone that whatever we're experiencing, it doesn't have to be so isolating. It doesn't have to be alone.
Yeah.
And you had developed a relationship with that teacher, and she had
so lucky.
She had seen in you so many great things, and even the friends that saw in you great things and wanted to enjoy their Science Olympiad experience while having you in the same room, right?
Good friends.
The connections that we make and the listening and the putting ourselves in uncomfortable situations and allowing people to know, you know what, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
That admitting of I'm actually not okay, and it's okay to say I'm not okay, I think is so important. And for people like you or like that teacher to pick it up and be like, oh, you're not okay? Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh,
but
I see
then that
you.
was also like, I realized how incredibly fortunate I am, right? I was so privileged that I got to go to a really good high school and that I had this incredible caring teacher who went out of her way to make sure her students were okay.
Yeah.
And I often think about, we've been talking a lot about how kind of trauma or difficulty or challenge or failure or whatever has actually made us who we are and enabled us to do the things we do. And I'm a huge proponent of that. Like, I would not be here doing what I'm doing. We wouldn't be talking at all if I hadn't had my tenure vote, right?
Yeah.
That set me off on the path of caring about leadership and being on social media and talking about these topics. And a lot of things that happened in my last job set me up to lead in the way that I do in my current job. But then I always have that thing in the back of my head of like, yeah, but a lot of people, for you, for me, for a lot of people, the trauma or the difficulty or challenge or whatever it is, the bad situation, it makes us who we are and it fires us like out of a cannon. I say I was like a slingshot, stretch. And then when it was let go, it's just like I'm going. But then for every one of those stories, there's so many stories of people who just break and who never come back. And so I think a lot about, I wake up every day with an incredible gratitude. I just have this sense of wonder of like, oh my goodness, I never, ever in my wildest dreams thought I could be where I am and have the family that I have and have the life and career and friends that I have and be doing the things I'm doing. And I just have this sense of wonder and gratitude every single day. But then I often think about, what was it in my life? Most of it probably wasn't me. Maybe some of it was, I was a pretty driven kid. Like I think that was evident from a young age, but probably most of it was not. It wasn't like through my effort that I made it instead of just breaking. It was a lot of things in my life and people looking out for me and really fortuitous situations that made the difference between where I am now and just being in a very, very different kind of broken place. And then I always think about, how do we bring more of those sorts of things to everyone, to the people out there who might be in similar situations. How do we ensure that everyone has that same support community or the same opportunities to thrive even in difficulty? And that's such a huge question, right?
I think it is. And I think also some of the things of like from your growing up or from my growing up is like, if you lack resources, you learn to become resourceful. If somebody says no, you learn to go try to ask somebody else who might say yes.
Yes.
Right? And I think those are the things that, and like I studied fracture, I studied catastrophic failure, I studied how cracks initiated and grew, and I got to break a lot of things. And I also learned how to be able to design things to be more resilient. For the structure, property, performance, relationships of a material are the same things that can help us as humans. When you understand your inherent structure, when you understand what are your natural abilities, what are the things that you do that's giving you energy, and what are the things that's taking away and making you feel like you're working against the current of the river of life, you can go back. So even if you broke, you can still recover. You can still bounce back. You won't be the same, but you will be better. Right? Even that like Japanese katsugi or something of that, like they break all that stuff that like, and then they like fuse it with gold of the broken pottery. That's the things from us. And for any single person who's ever questioned, what am I doing? Does anyone even care? How am I going to make an impact? How am I going to make money? How am I even going to get dinner? How am I going to dress, feed, clothe this life in front of me? How am I going to stay in this? Do I have to stay in this?
Yeah.
You absolutely can make one tiny choice today that helps you to get somewhere better, that helps you to get to your next success. If anyone of this
I totally get that. I will say though, I think there has to be, I mean, this is like you started talking about Mel Robbins, right? I've read a lot of her stuff, but I've read like I've heard her on a podcast, like the 3-2-1, just do something.
Yes.
And I use that, right? Like when I'm tired and I don't want to get out the door, it's like, all right, I'll just commit to running for 3 minutes or something, right?
Yes. I guess I don't have it here. But she had a book called, she has a book of the let them theory.
Oh, yeah. I've
and it's amazing.
I've listened to podcasts.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, somebody else, they don't want you to be at their conference, let them.
It's very helpful in leadership. But what I was going to say is that there is some amount of always have something in our domain of control that we can do. But coming back to that art where you put the broken pottery back together, it also takes someone else to pick up the pieces and put them back together. And I think maybe the intentionality is finding people in your life who are there. I mean, I think about my amazing spouse who has been that person for me so many times, or my closest friends. And it's that, we can't always put the pieces back together ourselves.
Yes.
And often what makes the difference between just staying broken and becoming whole and stronger and in this more beautiful place is those other people who are in our lives who can come alongside us and be like, I see that you are broken. We're gonna put this back together. We're gonna work together. You can recover from this. And I often tell anyone, but especially students, early career folks, this of like, if there's one thing to do right now, it's build that support network. Because life, career, whatever it is probably going to break you at some point. It may not be bad. It may not be completely shattered in a million pieces on the ground, but you're going to very, very, very likely get broken by life circumstances, by career circumstances, whatever it is, and put the people in your life who are going to help you bounce back from that, who are going to help you put all those pieces back, help you heal those cracks, help you see how you can come back stronger and better, and how you can use this to be even more of the person you want to be, whether that's more successful or kinder or a better leader, whatever it is. But having those people in your life makes such a difference.
I love that so much. I feel like I'd like to try to extend an invitation to talk more about stuff we didn't get to talk about yet, because I can.
We didn't talk at all about leadership.
No, we didn't get to it, but we got to so many other things. I love the organic chemistry, but I love the unfolding of the conversation. And I'm so grateful for you, for the presence that you are, for the leadership lessons that you share so freely, for the vulnerability that you show and your emotional intelligence. It's so rare to have a scientist that's intelligent, yes, and emotionally aware, emotionally intelligent, not only for your own self, but all of the work that you do to help inspire so many others of the future generations. And so I just want to thank you for the gift that is you. I look forward to our friendship continuing to develop.
Thanks so much for having me on the podcast.
Be sure to listen to the next episode as we continue the conversation with Dr. Jen Heemstra. See you then. Thanks for listening to Your Next Success with Dr. Carolyn Sengel. Remember, authentic success is yours to define and includes aligning your career to support the life you want.